Hi, this is Madal Nable Bakoy, the general introduction of approaches to morality. This presents the principal ideas and issues of ethics offered by philosophers from the classical to contemporary times. It's a third book in a three-volume series devoted to basic subject matters of philosophy, as the first two dealt with the philosophy of man and metaphysics. It is called speculative branches of philosophy because their main thrust is toward finding the satisfactory answers to the question they raise: what is it to be in metaphysics and what is it to be a man in the philosophy of man? On the contrary, ethics is no speculative science that seeks normative principles of conduct. It presupposes some principles from metaphysics and some notion of man's nature from the philosophy of man. But it is mainly concerned with what man should do, with what his action or conduct a man should be. In short, it is a philosophical study that seeks to find some principles of order for those human actions for which we are freely responsible and over which we have rational control with. Such deliberate actions are opposed to countless other acts of man: digestion, respiration, the activity of the nervous system, that are our own actions, but that are controlled automatically and without need for any choice or direction on our part. However, moral philosophers are concerned with human acts, with those actions in which we are free and responsible. They differ from psychiatrists, theologians, and psychologists in the point of view. In such, unlike the psychiatrist, moral philosophers is not concerned with the analysis of the subconscious motivation of any individual of the exposition of the emotions and feelings that accompany the actions of an individual in their lives. Meanwhile, the moralist differs as well from the theologian, as they uses the content of revelation as a source of his normative morality. And on the other hand, psychologist is interested in the measurement and analysis of the emotions and complexes that individual may have. He is not concerned with establishing a systematic structure of the way men ought to act, and later discovering by reason how men ought to act, which identifies the precise viewpoint of the moralist. Yet, even with the differences that do exist, certain similarities as well appear in the overview of the key ethical issues. In such, those are the value, obligation, natural law, and virtue. So, value, in technical term, it is axiology. It is defined as the object of human being, desire, and striving, which means the life lived accordingly to reason is the value or the end in view proper to human striving. Next would be obligation. With the technical term deontology, is the claim made upon us by reason that some things are to be done and deserve praise, whereas others are to be avoided and deserve blame. We all experience praise and blame in connection with the actions we perform, which is related to the notions of responsibility and freedom. We are responsible for actions when we are ready to account for them to ourselves or to others. Next would be natural law. From the word itself, it states that man himself is capable of setting up a standard of morality based on his own nature. And lastly, virtue. It is the power of moral action that enables man to act with ease and order in some area of his life, and excellences or good qualities which have been given emphasis from classical times up to today.
Good day, I am Debbie Joyce Labitad. So now let's tackle about analytic tradition. This is one of the various philosophical methodologies holding that clear and precise definition and argumentation are vital to productive philosophical inquiry. So it is a philosophical school of the 20th century, predominant in the United States and Great Britain, whose central concerns are nature of logic, concepts, and language. So nakafocus ni siya sa language, concepts, logic, and the nature of logic. And according to one tradition in analytic philosophy, or sometimes referred to as formalism, so for example, the definition of a concept can be determined by uncovering the underlying logical structures or logical forms of the sentences used to express it. So the analysts, they concentrate on the estimation of language, whereas the earlier hardcore, what do you call this, positivists are more concerned with the model of scientific method and the method of verification in the sciences. And analytic movement is in many ways a continuation of the analytic spirit of David Hume, whose clarity of style and logical rigor is considered exemplary by the analytical analysts. So our guy here, David Hume, kay usa ni siya ka Scottish philosopher. He's a historian, an economist, and essayist known especially for his philosophical empiricism and skepticism. Hume conceived philosophy as the inductive and experimental science of human nature. This movement, no, analytic tradition, this really began with the reaction of G.E. Moore and Bertrand Russell, as they see that philosophic language is seen to be an accurate logic whose function is to describe these atomic facts that are substance of all that is real. So Russell and Whitehead undertook to provide such a logic and their famous Principia Mathematica. As a result of these researches, these British philosophers became more and more interested in the possibility that maybe language could sometimes be very deceptive and create false issues and problems with it, which is true. Kay gisecond-handan ni siya ni A.J. Ayer. So at about the same time, our guy here, A.J. Ayer, was convinced that standard philosophical subjects such as metaphysics, for one, are really an abuse of language and ultimately composed of nonsense statements, according to him. Well, he came to this conclusion because he could find no way of testing the truth or falsity of many of the statements of idealistic metaphysicians. And the distinctive characteristic of analytic philosophy, is its insistence na the moral philosopher be constrained to the use of language that has no control of its terms and to the use of claims that can be warranted true or false, invalid or invalid. This movement considered system building as not proper for the philosophers and shares with naturalism a respect for confidence in the scientific method.
Good day, everyone. To continue with our discussion, let me tell you a story. There was a wife who unintentionally killed her husband. She only did it as a self-defense because her husband tried to hurt her and her daughter. There were two witnesses on the crime. So matang duha ka witness ni ato sa police station. The first witness was asked by the police if tinuod ba nga ang wife mo ay nagpatay sa husband. Namakak ang first witness kay para sa iya sakto ang gibuhat sa wife which is ang pagpatay kay deserve sa husband. So the second witness was asked by the police. The second witness, nitug-an siya nga ang wife mo ay nagpatay sa husband. Nakoy pangutanan ninyo guys, was the first witness action good or bad? How about the second witness action? Is it good or bad? You might already have different conclusions this time, but let's get back to that later on. Let me introduce to you naturalistic fallacy. Naturalistic fallacy was introduced by George Edward Moore in his 1903 book Principia Ethica. We commit this fallacy when we derive ethical conclusions from premises that are not ethical or when we attempt to describe ethical notions with terms that are not ethical. So kung sa Bisaya pa makahabuhat ta ani nga fallacy if ang ato ang sayop nga action gihimo nato siya og sakto. Let's now go back to the question that I asked earlier if good ba or bad ang gibuhat sa first witness nga namakak siya sa police nga dili ang wife mo ay nagpatay sa husband kay lagi para sa first witness is good ra ang action nga gibuhat sa wife which is ang pagpatay siyang husband kay deserve sa husband nga mamatay tungod sa iyahang gipangbuhat siyang family. But it is the conclusions of the first witness nga good ang action sa wife. It is a naturalistic fallacy. Okay, we all know that ang pagpatay is unethical actions. So bad yun na siya. Whatever the reasons, ang pagpatay is bad yun na siya. It is an unethical action. The first witness conclusions on the wife's actions ruins the standards of good. On the other hand, the second witness conclusions on the wife's actions give us the idea that good is good and bad is bad. So mauto siya, nisulti siya sa tinuod nga ang wife mo ay nagpatay sa husband. Kaya para sa second witness is bad is bad. So that is why the argument of Morse is that the good is simple and indefinable, that good is incapable of any definition. Moore claimed that the yellow in the tulip and the good of the good deeds share the same level of concrete immediacy to the knower. Para ni Moore is ang yellow and good is pareha sila, indefinable. Yellow is yellow, what is good, so whatever is the reason or the action itself is not good.
Good day everyone, I am Izelme Dagapon. I will continue Rochelle's topic, the perspective key issues. So the second one is emotive language. Emotive language, a second major theme of analytic ethics, is the suggestions of A.J. Ayer that ethical language must be sharply distinguished from the use of language in sciences, unlike scientific language. So which can be empirically confirmed and rendered meaningfully. Ethical language is emotional, so the specific word choices to create emotive language is that any word can cause an emotional reaction. In other words, mauni ang lain-laing ethical statement that merely reflect a personal emotional feeling or attitude nga naigamay nga meaning and more significance. Such as, for example, a monster of a man violated an underage girl. So the word monster, violated, and underage are the uses of emotive language. So in this sentence, for Ayer values cannot exist since they are outside the domain of the scientific verification and though meaningless. So Ayer's own statements of his emotive theory may be found in his selection from the language, truth, and logic in this volume. So the next one is the rule of persuasion that according to Charles L. Stevenson, who born in 1908, he agrees with Ayer that ethical statements are not scientific and accordingly cannot be verified in any public manner. So Stevenson, however, defines the emotive theory by considering moral imperatives as involving an individual's attempt to create an attitude of approval from those who would evaluate his action. So iyang nakita ang possibility of ethical attitudes and beliefs as properly the area of intelligent discussion. So bisan pa wala jud na verify sa public, so sama sa mga experimental sciences, moral confusions between disputants are genuine disagreements that can be resolved. So this is something true because persuasion can change or reinforce one's belief, which is one component of the ethical command. So the importance of persuasion in dealing with ethical attitudes and belief is covered in depth in the selection from Stevenson's work examined in this volume.
The approach of ordinary language. P.H. Noah Smith, B. 1914, represents the ordinary language approach to philosophy which developed within the field of analyzed philosophy. The ordinary language philosopher retains the desire to analyze philosophical notion with a great care, but his special characteristics is that he examines the use of term in a concrete context. Although Noel Smith shares some aspects of the emotion theory as it is developed by Ayer and Stevenson, so he does not reduce ethical statements to any single pattern. As well, be seen in the selection from Ethics 1954, he finds such patterns to be richly diversified. That's all. Thank you.